Hello and welcome to today's painting demonstration. My name is Leah and I teach acrylic painting on my YouTube channel here. Today I'm going to be doing a sunrise scene from just my local neighborhood. What I do is I start with the foundation, the photograph, then the thumbnail with the rework and how I'm going to use lead lines to direct your eye to the focal point, and then I lay it out on the painting surface before I start the stream. So I'm going to explain my entire process along the way, and I hope that you get some value out of that. And also, the reference image is going to be posted in my community feed, and that's going to be searchable via the name of the painting. So if you would like a closer view of that, then that would be the way to get it. So I hope that you enjoy this new layout. It's completely different for me, but it's more ergonomic. I was away for more than a couple weeks there because I was rear-ended, and so looking down in any capacity was giving me a lot of neck strain. So now that we are back and more ergonomic, it's going to be better for everybody, I hope. Now, the one thing that we did lose going forward is we lost the palette view and gained the reference photo view. And I'm hoping that since you know what colors I'm using, and I am going to still tell you what I'm mixing to create the color, that it will be net beneficial as far as the changes that were made. Because I just don't see how we get everything on the screen at the same time. That would be a trick for sure. I'm discovering I don't have any burnt sienna on my palette, so I'm going ahead and putting some on there because I start with a warm underpainting almost always. And so I have a pretty good amount of water in my large filbert brush, and I am going to start with the darkest values of the painting. Now you can see that the trees that I have here are pretty well detailed out. And you can go ahead and do that because the first layers of this painting are going to be really transparent, so you're not going to lose your illustration. I would rather start with more information on the paper than not quite enough and lose my way. I like starting with a nice defined foundation, and it makes you feel more confident during the painting process as well. Now, I don't need this to be super on line, like color within the lines. Just need to generally get the values in. And this is the darkest area of our painting for sure. Although I am going to make it quite a bit lighter than it is in the photograph. All right, now instead of adding more paint to my brush, I'm just adding some water. I'm going to scrape it off on the edge of the cup there, and then I'm going to go to the upper left corner, and I'm pulling brush strokes down from the corners. All corners of the painting will be darker than where we want your eye to go. Next, lightest value, so I'm dipping that in the water and wiping it off on a paper towel, adding more water, not paint. This is gonna be our next lightest value. The lightest part of the painting is going to be down by that palm tree. I'm going to make sure to address any drips. I'm not worried about the acrylic paint being watery because we're painting on a porous, absorbent surface. going to add a little bit more burnt sienna onto my brush, and I'm just going to darken these edges a little bit more from those corners. Now I'm going to make sure that everything is covered up, that there's no white poking out. Now that I have that all on there, it's covered up. It's going to be drying for a moment, so I'm going to take that opportunity to mix the next colors that I'm going to be using. And so I'm going to grab a palette knife here. I'm feeling kind of disoriented in this new setup. So I'm going to warm up the foreground here. Now you can tell that there is the sunlight is warming up that tree line, but I'm going to exaggerate that some. So the sun, I'm going to move it over as well. I'm going to move it to right behind this pine tree here. But this area right here will still be very light yellow colored. So I don't have to mix that. Okay, so what I think I will do is I will just bring the palette up when I'm doing the initial mixing. Well, I'm going to try it out and see if that's even in focus. It's not terrible. So I need a nice bright orange. So I'm taking cadmium red. There's a chunk of paint there. And cadmium yellow. And when I mix paints for a painting, I often will do a gradient. So I will mix a light version and just add a little bit onto the side. And when you're using a wet palette, you're mixing really, really tiny amounts of paint. And they stay nice and wet for you the whole time, and even into the subsequent days of painting, which is incredibly thrifty. Oh, see, my titanium white is making a run for it. Yep. That's fine. You know, I do have another camera. I might be able to flip into a different shot for paint mixing. I think that might be the proest way to do it. Let me know if you're watching in the comments if you think that would be the way to go. It wouldn't take much effort, just a little bit of practice to switch the frame over to a different shot. So I'm making myself a light yellow. And now we have our orange. And the next color I'm going to need a little bit of a subtle pink. And it's a warm pink too. And that is going to be, I'm going to use Cad Red, but also going to bring over some quinacridone magenta with the cadmium red, and that's how I get a slightly cooler pink. Look how rich that color is. It's really amazing. And that cooler pink that I'm making right now, some really more of a light purple, is going to turn into a full purple in the clouds. I'm wiping off that palette knife before I bring the white over to the Cad Red. And there's some pink. Pretty small amount of pink. I'm going to be dragging it over the clouds. Okay. I'm going to use my flat brush. 1/4 inch flat, dip in some water. We're going to start with the light yellow. And light yellow is making an appearance here. I'm trying to paint around my palm tree shapes. See how it goes. That's why those go in last. They're kind of detail oriented. All right, and then the yellow is going to come here to the left of the pine tree. And they go up a bit. Adding that angle because that fits our composition a little bit better. Have a little bit of pencil work defining the gist of how I want the clouds to form, but I don't have anything set in stone. I don't know if you can hear my dog is having a nightmare back there. Or maybe it's pleasant, who knows? I want to make sure that that yellow at that horizon point, that's the focal point, so I want to make sure that the brush strokes there are not distracting. I can always do another layer later. Okay, so sun point is here. I'm going to pick up the lightest orange that I have and pull from the outside of the painting towards the sun. Right up against that horizon line. If you feel like the yellow is picking up, then give it a little bit more time to dry. I can see that it's a little bit early to be doing blending like that. All right. Give your paintbrush a good rinse. Now we're going to go to the cadmium pink clouds. That color is pretty exciting. All right, so I'm going to drag at that angle. My flat brush is at a little bit of an angle. It's not directly flat on the painting surface, and that's so that I get a little bit of paint drag on the edge instead of just such a sharp edge. And I'm always turning this brush to get some different paint strokes, some different shapes out of it. Okay, very good. I'm going to add a little bit of light yellow over on the edge of this pink cloud because that is where the sun is. Now, I I see that that is a pretty high contrast line, so I may go and soften that up a bit. All right, using more of that cadmium pink, coming up the sky just a bit. Don't worry, if you don't like the cloud shapes that you've made so far, don't worry about it too much. We're going to be putting in a lot more layers. All right, so now that purple, the quinacridone magenta, pink color that we made earlier, it's more of a purple. I'm going to be changing over to that. Similar value as the pink. And I'm still using that flat brush. I have it at an angle and I'm dragging it over that pink color. A little bit chaotically even, to get some natural shapes. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that purple up a little bit higher on the left before we go to our next color choice, which is that same purple, but I'm going to mix a little bit of cadmium. This is not cadmium blue. There is no cadmium blue, cerulean blue. And at the top of the purple, the same exact mixing technique. Just dragging it along, incorporating it into the previous color, almost like a dry brush type technique. Okay, so I'm bringing this color higher up into the sky. Because from this color, we're just going to get a little bit whiter. Just bringing the color a little bit darker. I dragged a little bit more magenta into the paint that's going to go in the corners. And also I'm reminding myself a lot, if the paint is picking up, just come back to that area in a bit. Don't force it too much. similar mixture with a little bit more cerulean blue, and I am making some shapes on top of that purple. That's adding a lot of dimension. A little bit of pink on the sun side of that one right there. Now I know this is looking like a really chaotic mess, but it comes together after this. We're just getting these expressive, chaotic colors and brush strokes down first, and then we are going to cut in the sky. I feel like this method of doing sunsets is not only is it a lot less cumbersome as far as time, but you can be more expressive with your color blending. If you work all your warms first and then cut in your cools at the end, although the purple does end up getting very cool at the top. Right now, just focus on where your cloud shapes are going to be. Make sure that the intervals are different and that the shapes are different as well from each other. There isn't just a bunch of repeating round cloud shapes in a row. And you can fix a bunch of this when we cut in the blue, so no worries. Okay, I feel like I'm enjoying those shapes. That's pretty good. So now I'm just going to mix a cerulean blue with white, a really, really, really light color. And see how it's at the edge of my yellow? I know the glare is kind of killing what's happening here. So it's on the edge of the light yellow. I'm just going to drag this white and cerulean blue mixture over to the yellow so you get that really, really, really light aqua, technically green color. And that's what we're going to start with. So down here where the sky is yellow, it's going to transition from that yellow to this color here, which I think is technically a green. Take your time and artistically, carefully place these shapes in, because this is kind of like a magical part. Because as you put the cool on all these warm colors, they come alive. And if you want to make little tiny cuts on your edges, that's going to add a lot of interest. And is also fun to do. Now this color doesn't carry on for very long. It's a very narrow strip of sky. So you're going to want to grab the next darker color, which is a little bit more towards cerulean blue. And work your way up. A little bit of the underpainting shows, it lights up that purple color. Just remember, as you get higher up into the sky, to just grab progressively a little bit more cerulean blue. You accidentally cover up something that you really enjoyed, you can add it in after, but only after this blue dries. Which honestly is not taking very long, so just make sure there aren't any hard lines going up into the corners. It would be okay if you used a smaller brush for part of this, depending on what you want to see. Right now I'm just fixing up a little bit of the blending on the blue. I don't need it to be a smooth transition everywhere, but there we go. Okay, since the area next to the trees is completely done and nice and dry, I'm going to switch over to that and let our cloud layers dry out completely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and I'm going to mix our darkest value It's pretty much equal parts. And then on the corner of that, I'm going to put some quinacridone magenta. And that's going to be our warm color for those trees. Quinacridone colors are typically pretty transparent. So don't worry about that covering too much in the beginning. You can add another layer later. And these tree shapes, I'm going to try to paint up to the edge. And use whatever style of paintbrush is going to make you the most comfortable. If you want to go slow and use a point, I wouldn't blame you. Just try to get your hand into a position that is most stable for you. I'm using some alternating brush strokes to be artfully choppy down there. Going straight up that pine tree. And then I'm going to paint out from the trunk with the tippy tip edge of the flat. Beautiful, that quinacridone color up against that white yellow. It's really vibrant and alive. I am digging that. Okay, up the trunk with the next tree. I'm making sure that the pencil lines that I have down are covered, but I'm not worrying about going beyond the defined edge. That's fine. And trunk number 3. Now, I'm pulling some more ultramarine blue into this color to cool it down, and it will also make it darker. And as I'm moving away from our sunspot, these trees are going to get darker. some straight ultramarine blue to the right corner. And I'm incorporating it over to the left, just haphazardly. Okay, now those little palm trees. Those palm trees are really little. I'm still using the flat. I'm just putting in the trunk. Now I'm gonna set aside that flat brush. I'm gonna give that a rest for a bit. Picking up the, I would pick up my smallest point right now, but I think that the edges on my little point brush are fraying to the point of no repair. So I will be replacing and upgrading my Princeton Select rounds. They are just, yeah, they're tired. So I have my script brush, which is also Princeton, but is the Aqua Elite. It is a #1 script. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like stab, use a stabbing motion for the fronds. I'm going to stab out from where their origin point would be. You can do this when you're using really smooth paper because you're not going to hit any speed bumps. You can also turn and drag out from the center. The main takeaway being just coming out from the middle of the palm tree, leaving just a little bit, just a hint of the branch work from the fronds. Not like giant areas, just subtle. Now onto palm tree #2. In California, we have quite a few of these random fan palms. Even in the redwood forest nearby, which is where I grew up, there was a palm tree like this right behind my bedroom. Apparently, in the olden days, they marked the corner of property with these palm trees because they are very obvious. And that would make sense in this one's case because it was on the edge of our property line. Well, that's kind of funny. Now, I did not verify this information. Okay, that's looking good, and you can see a little bit of light coming through that palm tree. Now, what I would like to do is add some sky holes to this area. Now, another nice thing about using the wet palette is that you still have all the colors that we mixed earlier at your disposal, so just be careful where you put these, I don't want to scare you. It doesn't need to be the word careful, but just be intentional with your placement and what color you have on your brush. So this down here is like almost dry. Just don't put any where your trunks are, and then try to group them up a bit. Try not to have an even distribution. I think these should be light yellow. I might correct that. Coming back with the light yellow. So the method for the sky holes is to group with I don't know what this grouping strategy is called, but when you have a group of objects, try to keep them in odd numbers, so 3, 5, 7, something like that. And then make sure you have the least amount of big shapes, a medium amount of medium shapes, and then the most amount of the smaller shapes. And that would be the most aesthetically pleasing group of objects. You see it everywhere. Shelfscaping, graphic design. You use it a lot when painting rocks. One big rock, some medium rocks, lots of little rocks. Pretty happy with that distribution. They're looking very alive. I dig that. All right, now I'm gonna put some puffy white clouds in. You could use the flat brush if you didn't want to dirty another brush at this point, but I'm gonna use the filbert. And I'm gonna grab mostly titanium white with just the slightest amount of cerulean blue. And I don't have any water in this brush at all. I'm just gonna dry brush these wispies on so they would be on the edges of the purple. You can overlap and underlap your cloud shapes here. And just drag that paint. This is another thing that is easier to do when you have a smooth painting surface. can use this step to cover up any blends that you don't like or not quite as smooth as you wanted them to be. Now our focus is on our clouds. So just take a look, make sure that everything is where you want it. Fix any shapes that you feel like are bugging you. You still have all the colors at your disposal, hopefully, if you're using a wet palette. I'm going to drag a little bit of this pink. Now that this is all dry, I can put another layer in. And that will help me. I'm going to increase the depth of color here by doing this. By dragging these paints on, they're transparent when you add transparent paint layers. You're going to get gradients of color that are almost indistinguishable. It's very subtle. And that's going to really liven that up. Now I'm grabbing a little bit of orange, just a touch of orange. I'm going to come over here next to where the sun is coming from, and I'm going to dry brush drag this color and bring it up all the way to the top there. That same color without adding anything else. I'm just going to barely touch the underside of the clouds in the top here. I just cleaned off my brush. I'm just going to lighten that up a bit. And that's going to make those glow. Just checking out my composition here. Everything is nice and glowy. It's feeling very vivid and alive. And yeah, I think that pretty much does it. So stay tuned for the tape peel. I do it right after the stream and post it as a short on my channel. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today while we do our long-awaited sunset scene. Next Wednesday, I'm going to be doing some snow, some festive snow scenes for the season. So until then, thank you so much and happy painting.